Welcome to this explainer. We're so often told that the future belongs to the best coders, right? The most efficient executors, the people who can hustle the hardest. But the source material we're unpacking today reveals a completely different reality. The AI age isn't going to be inherited by the best rule followers. It's actually going to belong to those who simply know how to ask the absolute best questions. Human curiosity is literally becoming our ultimate currency. So to really understand this, let's look at a few real people who are already living this out.
Let's start with three incredible real-world stories straight from our source. Our first protagonist is actually the author himself, Jin Lee. He describes himself as a retired engineer with just an ordinary IQ. But here's the catch. For 30 years, he carried around this brilliant, highly complex educational vision in his head. The problem? He just lacked the verbal facility to translate those abstract ideas into prose that other people could actually understand. So for 3 long decades, this amazing seed of an idea just sat there in the dark, completely unbuilt.
Then you have his son, John. John is a teenager who took a totally different path and completely bypassed traditional high school. He didn't sit around waiting for a classroom to, assign him something to be curious about. Instead, he hacked his own education. He literally learned history by playing the video game Age of Empires. He decoded modern politics through these massive deep dives on Wikipedia, and he mastered coding on internet forums. By the time he was 15, he'd written this brilliant, clear-eyed critique of rote learning. He built his curriculum based entirely on what he actually wanted to know. And get this, our third story is a 91-year-old grandma. She has never had a single day of formal schooling in her entire life. Yet, when someone handed her an iPad loaded with advanced AI, she didn't freeze up. She didn't hunt around for some dense technical manual, and she certainly didn't wait around for permission or ask what she was allowed to do with it. Within days, she was just using it effortlessly.
Okay, so let's pause and really think about this. What in the world could these 3 incredibly different people possibly share? We've got a retired engineer with a 30-year backlog of ideas, a teenage gamer who totally bypassed the system, and a 91-year-old grandmother exploring cutting-edge tech. What makes these specific people so perfectly adapted for the AI age?
Let's dive into Section 1. 3 very different people, one shared trait. The connection between them is beautifully simple. Their curiosity was never crushed by a system demanding compliance. They weren't broken by an industrial education model that trains you to just sit quietly and wait for instructions. Look at what this 91-year-old mother said when someone asked how she figured out the AI so intuitively. She just said, "You just ask it questions." I mean, it's brilliant. When you aren't conditioned by a classroom to wait for a pre-approved, authorized answer, your very first instinct is to simply start asking.
Moving right along to our next concept. AI is fertile soil.
We all tend to treat AI like some kind of magic oracle or a robotic answering machine, right? But our source frames it in a much more fascinating way. AI is the richest, most fertile soil in human history. It searches this vast space of human knowledge to give you a response. But at the end of the day, it is just soil. And soil cannot generate a seed on its own. That seed has to be genuine human curiosity. Our source strictly defines this curiosity not just as a passing thought, but as the actual ability to transform a real-life observation, a vague unease, or a long-standing frustration into a concrete, researchable question with real stakes. AI doesn't wake up wondering why your business is failing, or why a 30-year-old idea won't leave you alone. Only a human does that.
And this brings us to a really stark contrast. For a century, the industrial classroom trained us in intellectual dependency. It taught us the habit of waiting for the teacher or the textbook to define the question for us. Now, that was costly before, but today, it is incredibly dangerous. The AI age strictly rewards the curious co-creator, people like John, taking the initiative. A passive student uses AI to just satisfy a compliance requirement, maybe write an essay they don't care about, and they grow absolutely nothing. But a curious learner uses it to map out a possibility space that neither of them could explore alone.
Let's look at the hard economics of this in Section 3, the value of the question.
Because, make no mistake, this isn't just some nice-sounding educational philosophy. It is hard economics. AI drops the cost of rote execution to practically zero. So a graduate who only knows how to follow instructions is suddenly competing against a free, tireless machine that doesn't need a salary and never takes a sick day. Because execution is now cheap, all the economic value shifts totally upstream. It moves to problem selection, synthesis, and question formation. Curiosity becomes the ultimate ignition key. You can have a high IQ, strict discipline, and plenty of capital, but without a living question, all those resources just sit there, vastly underused. which naturally leads us to Section 4, the Great AI Equalizer. Because of this massive economic shift, AI is acting as a huge societal equalizer for people who used to be filtered out by the rigid rules of the old system. Historically, if you had an original idea, you needed high verbal ability, institutional access, and serious capital. Take the real-world story of KKL's InfoMap innovation back in 1990s Malaysia. Brilliant idea, but he lacked the ecosystem and the specific Silicon Valley access you needed back then to make it explode globally. Fast forward to today, an original idea from the margins doesn't hit that same wall. With AI as your thinking partner and global distribution right at your fingertips, that idea can instantly become visible, testable, and buildable. AI has essentially ended the filtering.
Let's go back to our very first protagonist, Jin Lee. He took this exact philosophy from Buckminster Fuller to heart. You build a new model that makes the existing one obsolete. Remember that 30-year-old idea he just couldn't articulate? He finally used an AI partner as his translator. He supplied the raw, accumulated human seed, and the AI supplied the expression. Together, in just 2 months, they turned his life's work into the free Open PMC Protocol. It was an absolute triumph that historically would have taken a fully funded team 2 entire years to accomplish.
So, how do we put this into practice? Section 5, Planting the Curious Seed.
For the parents, educators, and policymakers watching this explainer, the implications here are absolutely huge. The window to restructure how we learn is closing fast, but the incredible news is that the cost to start fixing this is near zero. If you're a parent, you don't need to wait for some slow government reform. You can start tonight, literally at the dinner table. Instead of asking that standard question, what homework do you have? Try asking, what did you wonder about today? Then, take one of those wonders and turn it into a collaborative AI quest. Search it, test it, build it together. It's all about unlearning that habit of waiting for external validation and treating genuine questions like the vital competencies they are.
And for the policymakers out there, the math is equally clear. AI infrastructure, the models, the massive data centers, that's all becoming globally commoditized. Every nation has access to it. Therefore, the countries that are going to lead the next decade are solely the ones whose education systems generate a massive volume of novel, living questions. A generation of curiosity-cultivating graduates will compound into an absolutely unbeatable economic lead. And, as our source points out, setting up small, mentor-led pilot cells in schools to foster this, it requires practically zero cost. No new buildings, no new hires. The only required input is the actual will to begin.
The curious seed is entirely in your hands now, and in the hands of the next generation. Whether you're a teenager actively bypassing the traditional system, a 91-year-old grandmother exploring brand new tech, or a professional sitting on a decades-old idea, the AI age belongs to you, but only if you know how to ask. So before this window closes and we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to really spark your own journey. Ask yourself right now, what is your living question? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep asking questions.